There are two men remaining in the race to be both a leader of the UK Conservative Party and Prime Minister. But with only a tiny fraction of the public getting a vote, what impact will the outcome have on an already divided country? I'm Femi OK. Send your thoughts through Twitter and YouTube. We'll try to get them into the show. An estimated 160,000 Conservative Party members will choose between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt to succeed Theresa May as party leader. But because a general election isn't due, the winner will also get the keys to 10 Downing Street. Former London Mayor Johnson is the favourite to win the leadership ballot when it's announced in 3 weeks' time. Meanwhile, Hunt is highlighting his record as both Defence and Health Secretary. Both candidates have been appealing to party members in the run-up to the postal ballot.
We need to get Brexit done. And as someone who campaigned for Brexit, who believes in Brexit, someone who has meditated deeply on the opportunities that Brexit could bring our country, I am the right man.
When I talk to people running their own businesses, to farmers, to shopkeepers, to people on the high street who are worried about the situation that we're in now, they don't want a showman, they don't want to be entertained, they want a Prime Minister who is going to lead us out of this crisis.
For more on this race, we are joined from Strasbourg by Al Jazeera correspondent Lawrence Lee. He has reported widely on the leadership race as well as Brexit and UK politics. Tom Harwood is a journalist and commentator who mainly works as a reporter for the Guido Fawkes Conservative website. He joins us from London. And Danielle Rowley is a Member of Parliament representing the Scottish Council area of Midlothian for the opposition Labour Party. She joins us from London. Hello, everybody. The reason we are doing this show is because we ask our audience regularly, what story is making news where you live? And this is the comment that we got about a week ago. The Conservative leadership race between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt and the lies that they are telling to the UK public. You have Boris bumbling and waffling on, not answering questions properly, spewing out lies. Then we have Jeremy, who thinks the EU will work with him better. Tom, did they do a good job of summing up the Conservative leadership race?
I think that's quite a partisan way of looking at it. Really, what we have in this race is someone who has, for many people, been the face of Brexit for many years, Boris Johnson, who helped lead that Vote Leave campaign all the way back in 2016, who stood on debate stages around the country and persuaded the country to vote to leave the EU, up against Jeremy Hunt, who is someone who's considered to be much more of a diplomat, much more of a sort of straight-laced kind of person, not a, as he said in the clip, not a showman, but someone who did vote Remain. So you have this sort of more technocratic approach up against this more impassioned approach. And by the way that all the polls are looking right now, it looks like people are going to pump for the passion, the drive, the enthusiasm, more than that sort of laid-back technocratic attitude.
All right, I'm just looking at Jeremy Hunt's Twitter page here. I should have said he was the Foreign Secretary, and he currently is the Foreign Secretary for the UK. Jeremy Hunt, unite to win. How would you sum him up, Lawrence, as a candidate? He has less recognition globally than Boris Johnson, that's for sure.
No, and I think Tom's very much right in saying that, you know, Hunt is viewed as a technocrat. He wasn't a very popular health secretary, certainly inside the health service. And Boris Johnson, or Boris as he's known, just that in the UK, does have what people call the ready Brett glow. You know, he has this sort of charisma. I would say, to Tom's point about Boris having led the Leave campaign, both of them voted for Theresa May's Brexit deal when it was voted on in the Commons. But, you know, the thing that really ultimately they both have in common now, and this is the most important thing, is that they're trying to appeal to a Conservative Party membership that is absolutely insistent that the UK has to leave on the 31st of October. I think primarily because if the UK doesn't leave on the 31st of October, then probably the UK will never leave. And as well as that, if the UK doesn't leave, then there would be a general election sooner rather than later. And they're terrified of either losing enormous amounts of support to the Brexit party or losing the entire election to Jeremy Corbyn. And both of these candidates are saying openly that if they don't deliver Brexit, those things will happen. So as much as anything else, it seems to me that the impetus for the delivery of Brexit is as much about keeping the Conservative Party together as it is to do with the national interest. And that's not a partisan view of mine.
Sure.
It's what they say themselves.
Danielle, you're a young Labour MP. I want to put this to you. This comes from Faiza Mahmood. She's from the Black and Minority Ethnic Office for London Young Labour. And she makes this point about this Conservative leadership race. Have a look.
Tory leadership election is a total farce. It excludes millions of people having a say in the future of our country, but has serious consequences for people who face life and death situations because of austerity. The choice in this election is between two evils. Boris Johnson, a bigot who ran London to ground as its mayor, refers to gay people as bum boys and has called black people pickaninnies, and Jeremy Hunt, who's done more than anyone to dismantle our National Health Service.
Danielle, it's kind of awkward, right?
I think she phrased that so eloquently, and we've got someone who has in Hunt, someone who broke the NHS, and then we've got in Boris someone who wants to sell it off to Trump. So they can't be trusted. And we heard from that young woman there how much people feel let down by both of these contenders. So it is such a false choice. They're both absolutely complicit in austerity measures, which is so harmful in communities like mine in Midlothian, but across the UK. And they've been complicit in that. So no wonder people all across the UK feel like this is a false choice. I certainly wouldn't be excited about either of them. And it was interesting there that Jeremy Hunt, in the clip that you showed, talked about speaking up for businesses. Because when it was put to him, some small businesses may have to close down if there was a no-deal Brexit, he said that would be a necessary sacrifice. This is simply terrible. Why would anyone feel inspired by them or want either of them to be the next Prime Minister?
That's a good question for Tom. Tom.
So I think you're quite right in terms of Jeremy Hunt's pessimism there. He's someone who campaigned for Remain back in 2016, who just today was pointing to Bank of England reports that are predicting doom and gloom. But in reality, those same studies, those same reports 3 years ago predicted as a result of the vote that there'd be an immediate recession, that there'd be job losses, that there'd be all of these horrible outcomes for the country that simply never materialised. In reality, what happened after the referendum is the highest jobs growth that we've had. We now have more people in employment in this country than ever before. We're growing faster than Germany, faster than France, faster than Italy. This country's going gangbusters, really. And also, we've had an extra £394 million a week invested in our NHS. That wouldn't have happened without the referendum campaign. So what we've really seen is quite a successful 3 years, but a failure to deliver that actual result. So what we're looking at,
if I may, you sidestepped something that I think is really important, and that let me just show you this headline from Al Jazeera here. Given history of slurs, minorities fear Boris Johnson leadership. So you can talk about economy, you can talk about jobs, but what about the atmosphere within the UK? How minorities feel that they can operate in the UK? Do you want to address that? Because, wow, he's the master of insults.
I totally dispute that. Boris is someone who comes from a rich diversity of ethnic heritage himself. He's got
rich being the key word.
He's got family from Turkey, family from France.
Well, yes, his great-grandfather's Turkish, isn't he?
He's a smorgasbord of Eurasia. Yeah. And that's a wonderful thing, but also he's someone that stood up for and defended minority communities year after year.
Sorry, Tom. Was he standing up for minorities when he called women who wear the burqa letterboxes? Was that him standing up for minorities then?
Sorry, do you know the context of that comment? The context of that comment was hitting out against an EU country, Denmark, their illiberal ban on the burqa. Similarly, France has banned the burqa. Lots of European countries have banned the burqa. Boris was writing a column there defending the right of Muslim women to wear the burqa. He's had a consistently liberal position on all of these issues. And he's stood up for the rights of minorities, left, right and centre. And yes, sometimes he uses flowery language to do it, but look at his actual deeds beyond his words. Look at his deeds, and he has been one of the most steadfast liberal defenders of minority communities.
Go ahead. Tom's going to take a break.
Well,
Lawrence, go ahead.
No, I think I think Boris Johnson sometimes doesn't get his words out in a straight line. I think to Tom's point, I think the points, as I understood it, that he was making about women wearing what he calls, the letterbox, is he was trying to say that they were made to wear it, and they didn't have the right to wear what they wanted to. And in that sense, I think he was misrepresented, because he was trying to put it forward as a liberal position, even though it came out of his mouth as something rude. And I think this is one of the problems that Boris Johnson has, and this is what you've seen during, at least all the reports I've heard from inside the House of Commons. He's had to have minders with him, because he keeps trying to get involved in conversations with people and shooting his mouth off, and they're trying to drag him away because they're terrified he's going to go so far off message, and a lobby reporter is going to pick it up, and it will destroy his campaign. And so consequently, he's ended up in this what frankly looks like a pretty poor campaign, where he's ran away from open debates insofar as he can, because even if he's going to win, which I think he probably will, his people are very frightened of him saying or doing the wrong thing, because he can't control his mouth, even if what he wants to say might, in his view, be the right thing to say.
So guys, let's just move on a little bit and talk about the mechanics of this Conservative leadership race. I'm just going to take a pause, because we asked some of our Al Jazeera team to go out into the streets in the UK and just kind of feel what people are thinking on the streets about this Conservative leadership race that they are not able to take part in. Have a look.
I don't think they're very good. I think we've caught us in a rock and a hard place. You've got Boris. Need I say any more about Boris? And then you've got Jeremy Hunt.
Well, I think they both bring different things to the table. I think Boris is probably, he can act like a klutz, but he's probably quite smart. I think people like him. I think Jeremy Hunt is much smoother, more slick, but actually maybe he's a safer pair of hands. So we'll see.
I mean, you've got the person who killed the National Health Service, or you've got Boris Johnson. So, yeah, I'm spoilt for choice, really. I wish I could work for both. I'm being sarcastic, by the way. Actually makes me want to cry or vomit on my shoes as a country. That's what we've got.
So when you come back and have a look here, because this is the Conservative leadership race, and Lloyd Myatt points out, unfortunately, the general British public will not get to choose. Only 160,000 Conservative Party members will, and 30% of them are over 65, which the majority would have voted to leave the EU. Other than that, idealistic political promises from both have not played well. So this idea of who gets to pick the next British Prime Minister, Tom, do you want to explain why so few people are able to do it?
Absolutely. We run a parliamentary democracy in this country, not a presidential system. And that means that the Prime Minister is someone who can command a majority in Parliament. And currently, the person that can command a majority in Parliament is the leader of the Conservative Party, who have an agreement with a smaller party from Northern Ireland. And that means whoever the Conservative Party pick to lead that party becomes the Prime Minister, because they can command that majority. And so that means that it's an internal matter for the Conservative Party, who then, at 2022 at the latest, probably, if we're being honest with ourselves, a lot earlier than that, then it will go to the people in what's called a general election, whereby members of Parliament will be elected by the people of this country, and members of Parliament, in effect, will decide the Prime Minister. This is the same system that we've had for hundreds of years, and it's always peculiar. Whenever there's a change of executive in the middle of a parliamentary term, one side gets outraged, the side that isn't holding power at that time, and it always flips round in terms of this manufactured outrage. The Tories got annoyed when Labour did it, the Labour Party get annoyed when the Tories do it.
Exactly.
It's always been that way.
I remember when Gordon Brown became Prime Minister,
That's
and people were not happy about that. Lawrence, go ahead.
Well, Boris is outrageous. Gordon Brown's Prime Minister without having a general election. How dare he? and he's going to be in exactly the same position. But the other thing I think it's worth pointing out too, in response to that tweet you just put on screen, is that it's all very well saying that people don't get to choose. I mean, one of the points about the main opposition, Labour Party, is that what's the phrase they use to describe their prevarication over taking a position?
Constructive ambiguity.
Over Brexit. Constructive ambiguity. Thank you. I mean, how much further actually have they got to run with this before everybody runs out of time? Because there is this gigantic hole between Jeremy Corbyn and his main union backer, Len McCluskey, and his closest advisor, and the rest of the party, and the party membership, which plainly wants either no Brexit or at the very least a second referendum, and the party leadership is miles away from accepting its mandate from its own membership. And I do think, and again, this isn't a partisan view of mine, but had the Labour Party had a much more definitive position, then some of the amendments in the Commons that got lost by them over the last few months might actually have been won, and I don't think the country would be in this state of uncertainties at the moment.
Danielle, go ahead.
I think it's a cheek, actually, to blame Labour for the state that we're in with Brexit when, we've had the Conservatives presiding over these failed talks. We've had these red lines, not being able to secure a mandate in Parliament. It's Theresa May's failing for not being able to secure that majority for her deal and not working with other parties effectively. And, it's a failing of everyone in her cabinet, actually, who hasn't engaged the public enough, hasn't been out speaking to people to get people on side with that. But
Parliament had the votes. Parliament had all these chances to vote.
And
they couldn't vote for anything,
could they? And
no,
that's
because
something that
there were loads of Labour MPs who couldn't vote for their party position, weren't there?
We've been told time and time again to vote for Theresa May's deal, but it's just not acceptable to Parliament because it is a bad deal and it's full of holes. So Parliament wouldn't accept it, no. And that is Theresa May's fault.
Let's talk about who's actually going to be voting for the next UK Prime Minister. This is Lacey Butcher here. She's a Leave voter and she's a Conservative Party member. This is what she told us about her position. Have a listen.
I don't think it's unfair to say that there's probably never been a more controversial time to identify yourself as a young Conservative than there is right now, especially with Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party promising so much for young people. It's understandable to see why someone might question why I choose to identify myself as a young Conservative. Whichever candidate my party chooses to be the next Prime Minister, all I can hope is that they strive to fulfil the democratic mandate to leave the European Union and thereafter continue to build on the Conservative plan to build more jobs, increase our economy and security, put an end to austerity, and continue to build a stronger, fairer and more prosperous Britain.
I'm just wondering about the demographic, the voters who will be voting for the next Prime Minister of the UK. Who do they represent? Who are they, Tom, as far as you understand?
Well, the average age of a Conservative Party member is 57. That's a little bit older than the average age of a Labour Party member, which is 53, but not an extraordinary amount older. In general, people who join political parties in the United Kingdom of all parties tend to be in that sort of mid-50s age range. So they will be representing something that's slightly different from the rest of the country, but in some ways that's a good thing because it means that then at a general election you get a choice. You get Labour Party members choosing the Labour Party leader, you get Conservative Party members choosing the Conservative Party leader, and then you get an actual battle of ideas. If everyone chose the leader for every party, you just end up with some soggy centrist fighting some soggy centrist, and there'd be nothing to discuss.
Well, the point there that's really important is, yes, so you have Conservative members choosing the Conservative leader, you have Labour members choosing the Labour leader, and then you have that battle of ideas through a general election, which we have to have now.
Let me just go back to Mohammed Yunus, who suggested this programme in the first place. And the reason he suggested it was he was not impressed by what was happening in the UK right now with the Conservative leadership race. This is what he has to say, and we're going to be mentioning the B word. Let's have a look.
The Hunt or Johnson government will be disastrous for this country. Because they're hardline Brexiteers, The UK now is a Remainer now. The latest YouGov poll showed that 25% of the general population want a no deal, but 43% want to revoke Article 50. And Johnson and Hunt won't listen, or aren't willing to listen to the public now.
So, Lawrence, I'm just wondering, I'm going via this tweet as well. This is Dr. Matt, and he's talking about parliamentary time is being sucked into Brexit and what is happening with Brexit and what is not happening with Brexit. What about the rest of the UK politics? What's happening with all the other issues that perhaps should be discussed?
There's nothing.
That's not being discussed.
There's nothing.
Yeah?
No. They can't even have a Queen's speech. They can't do anything because Brexit has just sucked all the life out of everything. They can't legislate for anything at all, and it's taken all the bandwidth out. The thing is, just to come back to what Tom was saying a minute ago, the Conservative Party membership, right, is pretty old and white and almost entirely English. Yeah, there was a poll in the Times the other day that said to them, what's it going to take for you to deliver Brexit? And there was an overwhelming majority for allowing Scotland to go independent and Northern Ireland to go independent in terms of delivering Brexit. You know, and this is the Conservative and Unionist party of the UK. So, you know, they are so absolutely determined, and to the point that your guest made there, they do not represent the country. They really genuinely don't, you know, in terms of their demographic or their belief system. It is true that every single poll that says there's about between 25 and 28% of the population want a no-deal Brexit. And you know, there are some who don't know and some who want a softer Brexit and more than that, but not a majority. Who think the whole thing's been such a disaster they should abandon the project. And so the country's basically more or less a three-way split. But, you know, if it is about the delivery of democracy, I think it's quite difficult to make the case anymore that a no-deal Brexit is the democratic mandate. I just don't think you can say that anymore, partly because when the referendum happened in 2016, it was do you want to leave or stay in the European Union was presented as a binary choice when there are actually 4 or 5 different ways of doing Brexit, and it wasn't specific at the time. But no other business in Parliament. They tried to do a few bits and pieces, but it's cursory because Brexit has just paralysed the country entirely.
I'm just wondering what's at stake, Danielle, from your perspective, as to who actually then becomes the leader of the Conservative Party, then becomes the Prime Minister. From your perspective, what are your hopes? What are your fears?
Well, I think to pick up on what Lawrence said there, he's absolutely right. Parliament has been stuck. It's been stale for so long now because of Brexit. So what's really been at stake is that things haven't been getting discussed that are really important. We've been calling for so many debates. I called recently for a debate on young people's mental health, but we're just not having anything going through Parliament. No legislation's going through Parliament because of this. But when I said earlier about, you know, Jeremy Hunt's comments about, you know, the businesses, and Tom said that he's quite the pessimist and that Boris isn't. Actually, Boris has said that we need to leave do or die, which, you know, is quite dramatic language, but also that's quite pessimistic, is it not? And it just seems that they're so uninspiring.
In terms of metaphor there. That was actually a quote that was put to him by a journalist at Talk Radio, and it is a fact of life that the Conservative Party would not survive a general election if it fails to deliver the promise that it has been saying it will deliver for the past 3 years.
On that point, then, it's all about the Conservative Party. That's why we had the referendum in the first place. David Cameron trying to save the party, keep the party together. And now you've got two men
17.4 million people in the country just care about the fortunes of the Conservative Party? The reason why we had the referendum was because there was a huge swelling of Euroscepticism.
You're listening to the Conservative voice of Tom Howard, and you heard just there the Labour voice of Daniel Rowley, and then before that you heard the beautiful voice of Lawrence Lee, who surprisingly is not grey-haired with all the reporting he's been doing about Brexit and the European Union and the UK Conservative leadership race. Thanks for watching, everybody. We will continue online at AJ Stream. See you next time.